All right, welcome everybody. This is day 2 of BigBlueButton World, and we are very fortunate to have the keynote speaker is Martin Dougiamas. Martin, for those of you that, if you're in education, I'm not sure how you would not know, but he is the co-founder or the founder of Moodle. Had been working at it now over 25 years and recently stepped back from the CEO role, which he had had for 20 years at Moodle. Moodle is the most dominant learning management system in the world. A large part of it is due to its open source nature and the unrelenting push and effort that Martin's put over the years. And Martin now has sort of shifted focus a bit. As you know, we live in a world where AI is everywhere and no less so in education. So Martin's role now is the head of research at Moodle and is also quite involved in UN Sustainable Goals and also on the board of Open Education Global and the founder of the Open EdTech Association. It is my pleasure to turn it over to Martin. And Martin, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Fred. Real pleasure. Thank you for inviting me to your conference, and I'm really happy to do so and be part of it. Moodle and BigBlueButton have a long history going back, and we've done a lot of things together, and Open EdTech as well, which we'll talk about later. That's the shirt. So I'm going to get into it here, and I will be talking a little about Moodle, of course, but I'll be trying to talk about it in useful ways if you're a BigBlueButton user, because I think there's a lot of common things in the industry we need to discuss. So I'm currently leading the Moodle research function at Moodle, and this is us working on some robots. We are brand new, a very new thing, and as Fred just said, I gave up the CEO role so that I didn't have to think about all those things and I could just think about this. So in a way, I feel a bit like I've stepped right back to the founding of Moodle again, and I'm going back to first principles and redesigning things. And here is our place on Moodle.org, where we do research in the open. Everyone's welcome to be part of it. We do surveys, we have fortnightly meetings and sharing of things, and we're doing a lot of nice, interesting stuff. But we're going to be talking a lot about how things relate with BigBlueButton today, as I said, and let's get on with it. So let's talk about today's world, the way I'm seeing it. There are a lot of problems in the world. Here are some of them. There is an unbounded capitalism. There is these multi-trillion-dollar companies setting the agenda, running almost without any bounds. You know, we have all sorts of human rights problems. We have all sorts of social fragmentation. We have pandemics. We have unemployment. We have climate change. We have all this stuff going on. And even though there's a lot of good things to talk about as well in today's world, there's all this. And some years ago, the Sustainable Development Goals was the UN's attempt to summarize these things in a nice agenda for the whole world to work on, these global goals. And one of those is about quality education. And that's what we're all about here, I'm sure. And particularly for me, as I always say, that quality education actually drives everything else. You can fix everything else if you had quality education. If you have very well educated people, if the whole globe was very well educated, then a lot of those problems would be much more solvable. But right now, globally, I don't think education is that good at all. You know, it's a goal for a reason, and not for the reasons I think that perhaps everyone's thinking about. For me, I feel education has morphed into creating workers. It's been subsumed by capitalism, and it's become this way we train people to have jobs and become part of organizations. And what are organizations? Organizations is a whole lot of brains, people working together in a structured way to get things done. And, you know, we get most things done through organizations. But they're kind of like artificial intelligences of a sort, the way we build organizations. They're like how ants get together and build an ant's nest. It's like a collective intelligence. This is how we as humans come together and create things on a larger scale. And that's because we didn't have the technology to do anything else. And as we've pushed people into educating for work and being first forced to work to live, we're more and more educating people in narrower and narrower spheres. And not everyone, I think in many parts of the world, you don't see a very broad understanding of the world that would maybe help democracy, for example. You get very polarized views and problems like that. So we're not really educating for citizens. And this is a huge problem, in my opinion. I think this is going to be forced to change. And this is the thrust of what we're going to be talking about today. So let's look at the automated world that is coming. Now, I've been talking about variations of this for years now, and people were like, what are you talking about, Martin? And I think probably now, and especially this audience, you're familiar with a lot of these things. So I'm going to go fairly quickly through it. You're seeing the trends, I think. The news is hitting the mainstream. A lot more people are becoming aware of how technology is going. So look at LLMs and their intelligence. This is a graph from Life Architect. He's actually a friend of mine, lives here in Perth. And he's been following AI for quite a lot of years. He has some graphs here showing how the current large language models achieve human expert level intelligence already in certain ways. So, you're not going to marry one yet. It's not like a full being, but in forms of, in certain measures of intelligence, they're beating us already, and it's obviously growing. We're seeing, oh, hang on, did I just skip something? No, there we go. So we're seeing a lot of video generation really becoming quite high quality. We're seeing models that can do music generation. Here's a little song about Big Blue Button that I generated. I'm not going to play it for you because you can go and generate your own. That's exactly the point. And the quality of the audio in these things is already, most people can't distinguish it from human-produced music. I still can. I notice younger people in particular can really identify more easily, but it's getting very good. I'm sure you've seen demos from OpenAI, their recent demos of GPT-4o and all these multimodal interactions, and that's a whole level of technology, like the movie Her, where you can have this much more dynamic interaction, and it can hear things and so on. But it's not just about the intelligence of a particular LLM service like these ones. There are all of these other things that are being seen as problems right now, but they are all being solved. So I spend a lot of my time in my new research position reading research papers and looking at what's coming out. And there are solutions for all of this. So things like increasing short-term memory. You've seen people lengthening the context. You can put more stuff into a particular query. Adding long-term memory. Hey, let's try some boxes. Adding long-term memory is a problem being solved. So the idea that you have an ongoing conversation with a language model that may spread over years and years and years. And that it remembers you and becomes much more personal. The issue of reasoning, which is often a flaw with current LLMs, you're seeing it falls down sometimes very basic reasoning questions that will fall down. There are so many solutions being worked on around that area. AIs are being integrated with everything. We're seeing AIs integrated not only within products, but also products having APIs that let AIs operate those products from the outside. And that means AIs can start doing all sorts of crazy things by using your computer or by bringing websites together and doing crazy, interesting things. Embodiment. So a real problem with AI is that AI language models don't really have a conception of what it's like to be in the world. They have a theoretical conception from reading about it, but they don't have that sense of being in the world. And that causes a lot of their responses to have issues. But that is coming, where the robots, I'll show you in a minute, are really addressing that. High performance hardware. Everyone's using GPUs mostly to run AIs right now. GPUs are graphics processing units designed to process graphics. It happens that they're pretty okay at doing language model calculations because it's all matrices. But if you look at Grok and other companies that are making specific chips for AI, they're seeing a 10 times, 20 times, 100 times performance improvement. And as they become more common and the cost comes down and they get smaller and more lightweight, this will get into all of our hardware. So that means more AI running locally, which is really important because I certainly don't really trust any large company to have all of my data and give me all of my directions. It's very hard to trust, no matter what guarantees they might put in there. In the end, the only way to have some full sense of privacy is to run your own AI. And this is already very possible. I run an AI constantly on the very laptop that I'm presenting on right now, and multiple, in fact, and that's quite doable on a fast laptop. It will be more and more doable on much lower end devices and entry-level phones and things as well. Agents. So agents, most language models, we send a prompt and we get a response, whereas an agent is something that's running all the time and it's off doing work for you in the background. And you might give it a query and it comes back, it can work on it for a day and come back with a very high quality result. And you get teams of agents and things like that. And another big issue that we are running into is around copyright. All these models all the big models we're using are trained on data scraped off the internet in various ways. The music models probably scraped Spotify. All the other ones probably there are many web data sets. Now a lot of people are up in arms, like, oh, you're copying our stuff, you're breaking copyright. And in my view, that is not true. A model is reading it just like a person would read it. In my view, it's fair use. But I think the whole concept of copyright is kind of a bit of a bad concept in my view. And I'll tell you why, because in a digital world, we copy things just to see them. You're copying stuff all of the time. In the digital world, in the electronic world, copies are just electrons. So whereas copyright was more created for a more physical world where you had atoms and they were harder to copy. Anyway, regardless of the many outstanding court cases, none of which have been resolved around copyright, there are solutions to this because a lot of people are working on generating synthetic data that lets you train models, the future models, and it's possible that future models won't rely on human-generated content at all. So there are solutions for all these things, the problems that we're having here. And well, I didn't really actually include the hallucinations, which is the most biggest thing that hits people. And actually improving reasoning and having agents and having faster, bigger models also solves that. And there's a lot of people working on AIs having knowledge graphs and things to circumvent the hallucination issue. So I'm very confident that things will improve a lot, and we are here at the beginning of the journey. The AI that's with us now is the worst AI you're ever going to see in your life. It will only get better and better and better, and it will get crazy good. I will also want to mention augmented reality because I spend a lot of time thinking and working with that as well. augmented, this is a very bad thumbnail of a video, which I'm not going to show you, of somebody using a Vision Pro, an Apple Vision Pro. I saw today that Meta has updated their operating system to basically look like the Vision Pro. It's an example of how finally, after decades of waiting, really, that the digital world being interposed on top of the real world is really becoming a useful reality that you might actually use every day. And they don't have to be big helmets. There are glasses with waveguides, and I've got here, this is an augmented reality glasses. This is the Ray Neo X2. So there are screens in here, and these are waveguides. And as you can see, it's just transparent glass. But I'm seeing a quite rich picture. So it's really, and you know, they're just sort of fat glasses, but they run, got its own operating system, and it's running its own software. This stuff will become more and more, more common, and a lot of us are wearing glasses already. So you can sort of see that it will start to creep in, and before you know it, everybody's got these things going on. And looking at robots, you may have seen that this is the figure 1 from a couple of months ago, and they showed it with in real time with GPT models running it, doing some pretty crazy things, good things, washing dishes and responding to this guy and giving him food and things like that. That was an expensive robot. This is a cheap robot. This robot cost $16,000 and is about that high. In this shot, this guy's about to punch it, or he's just kicked it, which is quite nasty, and I would never do that to a robot. But you can see here, it folds itself up into a little package. It's about 35 kilograms. Very lightweight, very capable, has full movement of all of its joints, and basically you can put any software behind that to drive it. And if there are already robot operating systems that are built on top of language models that just do really capable things, and they're just going to get faster and better. And you know, you can teach them anything you need to teach them. As soon as I can have one in the house to do the kitchen, I will. That's something. So you may remember this movie. It's really sort of coming true, the Bicentennial Man. I wonder if they're going to get to a point where they start being sentient and demanding their freedom. And that is a question up to us. It's like, how much intelligence do we want to put in these things? And I'm going to revisit that question a couple of times. It's really our choice. But fundamentally, all of this stuff is labor replacing. It replaces labor, replaces work. And it's the trend that is the biggest trend underneath everything. And AI will replace human labor in bits and pieces over time, because as soon as any particular use case, AI is better or cheaper or faster or safer, then some company or somebody is going to choose to use AI or robots, right, to do that particular task. And safer is an interesting one. So self-driving cars are proven to be safer than human drivers. If they become widely available, it would almost be unethical to let people drive, because you're going to kill more people. So you would almost be forced, in that case, to start mandating robots do driving. Interesting. So what's the best case world that we're heading for? Right? What does it look like? Well, we have a chance of building a utopia of post-scarcity. If you think about it, a lot of the world around us today is based on scarcity. There's only so many of a certain thing, and so you've got to pay for it, right? And so the prices go up because there's not so much of that thing. That's a very common dynamic in economics. There's not infinite things. It all costs money, and it's all expensive. But if we have automation building and creating all the things, doing all of the work, we have more to go around, and we can achieve this kind of state of utopia. And you might say, well, okay, if the robots are doing all the work, what do we do, right? Oh, my whole life is around my job. Well, not necessarily. So this is Maslow's hierarchy of needs. The first two layers here are about your safety needs and your physiological needs, keeping yourself alive. Now, imagine they're taken care of. Imagine we sorted out all the politics around it and we took care of that. Well, we can focus on this top part, right? So there's belongingness, love needs, relationships, friends, communities, esteem, accomplishing things, learning things, basically. And lastly, achieving your full potential. So each one of us as a person, we're like a flower or a plant growing. We can grow and reach our full potential and be self-fulfilled, right? It's nirvana, become enlightened. This is a possibility, right? So this is an idealistic point of view, right? At one end of the extreme. But I think there's plenty to do, even if we have robots doing all the work. In actual fact, we would be freed up to do those things because less and less of our time is spent working for inside organizations just to earn a living. Like, you literally, the whole concept, you have to work for somebody to live, is so embedded in our economy and our culture that we take it for granted. But this may change, because if we do solve it in the right way, we have more and more free time to learn, pursue hobbies, support projects, engage in community groups, save the earth, care for each other, perhaps, I hope, all those things. Now, you might think, well, Martin, what are you smoking? Well, it's not that time of night. I think this could happen. I hope it would happen. But it's not that strange, really, because you think, who on this planet is already in this situation, right? It's rich people, right? People who are rich, that's what they do. They have robots, i.e. staff, cleaning their houses. They have everything taken care of, and they're freed up to do fundraising and community stuff, and they have a lovely time. And that's great, but wouldn't it be wonderful if we could all be the same? So to achieve that, we need to get universal basic income sorted. And I won't go too much into that now, but basically it's fairly obvious. The idea that we work out government in a way that taxes on very large companies and entities pay for everyone to have a salary. No questions asked, no means testing. So essentially everyone doesn't need to work to live anymore. Now that's something we have to solve, and people have been working on this for decades. There are lots of great plans. There are experiments happening around the world. I think it's something that needs to. So if you have any connection with any politicians, make sure you have this conversation with them. Now, what's the worst case look like? Well, you're already seeing it in the AI world. You're seeing the Silicon Valley startup mentality getting straight into control and trying to own your data and run the things and be who you depend on. And I'm sure you've seen plenty of dystopia science fiction films like Cyberpunk to see what that future could look like, with corporates running everything. Governments are kind of weak and useless. You depend on very large companies for everything. And there's a definite hierarchy of control, with very rich, powerful people running everything, owning all the robots, and generally controlling. I mean, no one wants that. So, with that all laid out, what does this all mean for education? Well, I think education should be moving away from training for jobs over time. And, well, we should already be doing this. We should be spending more time working on explicit skills and qualities like critical thinking, empathy, leadership, adaptability, resilience, creativity, mindfulness. These are and general knowledge, of course. Like, these are things that are perennial. These are things that make people good citizens. This makes people make good decisions. It helps people work together. That's what we should be focusing on, I think, is education should be turning more towards making citizens rather than workers. And secondly, education processes should focus on using AI to reduce admin and transforming data, not replacing the work that we require to learn or enjoy life. And I'm going to dig into this a bit. This phrase, I think, really nails how I've been thinking in the last 6 months, particularly about how we deal with all these wonderful toys that are coming up. Yeah, it's great that Moodle, that AI can make music and videos, but should it? And as exciting as it is, we need to think carefully about how we're using AI and why, and what sort of world we're creating. Back in the early days of Moodle, the very beginning of Moodle, I was wrestling with a similar thing. I was wrestling with education and the internet, and this was 25 years ago. And it was a very similar time to now, in that there was tons of startups and crazy things going on. It was the dot-com boom. And I was thinking, how do we chart a course for education software, EdTech here? And I came up with, from research, with these 5 referents, I called them. And a referent is like a guiding star that you keep, print it out, stick it on your monitor, on your screen, on your wall in front of you physically, like put it there. I did. I had these things on my wall. And whenever I had a technical decision to make, whether it was a software feature or an implementation, I would turn to these and go, am I doing these things? Am I following these things? Am I promoting these kind of activities? And that's why you'll see in Moodle, for the first one, for example, there's tons of roles and permissions. It's very easy to make a student and give them teacher permissions. And that's because sometimes that's actually a really good way to learn, is if you get someone teaching other people. And just recognizing that we're all learning from each other all the time is important. And so that gets you away from a transmission point of view, whereas here is the content, go and read it. It's different. So this is, I would say, the first reference for the AI age that I want to share, that I'm using, is this one, that we want to reduce the admin, get rid of the boring drudgery stuff. So wherever you're using AI, just think, am I getting rid of something boring that people don't want to do? Then it's probably a good thing. And secondly, AI is very good at transforming data. So you might have a long pile of data and you want to summarize it. AI is brilliant for that. You want to convert something from text into audio, or from audio into text. AI is brilliant at that. So these are the things we should focus on, I think, in education. And not the last bit, our brains require to learn, because to learn anything, you need to make this muscle work. It needs to do the work. It needs to burn calories, and it needs to do the activity. And that's how you physically change your synaptic connections and neurons in your brain. You cannot achieve that if you get an AI to do the work for you. Right? You've got work done, but you haven't learned. And so that's the difference. Right. So what are we doing at Moodle? Well, the first thing we're doing is something that a core organization should be doing, is supporting the community of developers. And it's this is our main thing we're working on right now for the next release, which is an AI subsystem for the Moodle platform, which means that a particular instance of Moodle can use whatever AI they choose, but they use it in Moodle in a consistent way. And that means that at the user interface layer, you have plugins and features and functionality. They can operate in a consistent way so that users are not confused. And you can just change the AI engines and customize them in the back end, because the AI models are changing on a weekly basis. So this is about making the admin a lot simpler. And it's also about making a consistent stack for Moodle developers to work on. And I would advise very similar things in BigBlueButton World as well, to try and get some standards around that so that you can all move together faster, and not have to worry about the bit of code that makes this AI work on this particular bit of code. The other things that we're working on are a few projects, and these are my sort of pet projects that my team is working on. So the first one, obviously, we're supporting the Moodle LMS. So we're writing a big report at the moment where we're summarizing the results of a bunch of surveys and thinking about particular areas in Moodle that we think would really benefit from a little sprinkling of AI. And that's one example of what we're doing here. The second thing is an app for learners called Coach. Now, I've been working on this for a couple of years. This is a rough diagram of the structure of how it looks. And up till recently, up till a couple of months ago, I've been really trying to build the whole stack. So an app that runs on your phone, that contains an LLM, and that talks to all the parts of your operating system to get data from other apps. And this LLM stores that in a database, a RAG system, and thus has a memory about you and all the things you're doing and all the stuff that's going on. So it can access your calendar, it can access your LMS, would connect to BigBlueButton, get data from there. It would connect to your messages. You also talk to it, so it collects data from your voice with your conversations. And all that data that's stored in the database can be dumped, can be exported, and then imported again. So it's all on your own device. And the idea would be that if you upgrade your phone or you move to a different device, that you can carry that with you, and that you don't have to rebuild it all again, because you want this thing to be with you for years. So this was hard to build on current hardware, almost impossible, because the amount of processing that had to happen meant your phone was working so hard that it would run out of batteries in no time. And thankfully, I was very happy to see Apple's announcements. Now, of the big tech companies in Silicon Valley, I like Apple the most. Not everyone is a fan, but for me, their approach to privacy is second to none. And what they've done with the new work on Apple Intelligence is they're working very hard on optimizing their operating system and their hardware to do exactly what I was just showing you Coach was going to do. So it's already pulling information from all the apps, all your calendar stuff, all your mail, and it's using that to make decisions. What they're not doing is focusing on your learning journey, and that's what I was focusing on. So now the approach will be that we write a much smaller app that builds on top of the operating system AI to implement the learning part. So I really want this to be a coach. If you're living through a big transition like we're all about to, and jobs are disappearing and you need to scramble and survive until we get UBI sorted, then you're going to need help with your learning and a lifelong learning. And the idea of Coach is that it really works with you to optimize you getting to your goals, whatever they are. And it's not teaching you, it's hooking you up with local education opportunities. It's guiding you, it's coaching you. My wife's actually a coach and a counselor, and I know how helpful she can be to people. And I think that would be a useful app here. And I assume, because this always happens, Android is going to copy Apple at some point. It just makes good sense that the operating systems implement a lot of this stuff at a low level, and then the apps can take advantage of it. So that's what we're going to work on with that. Now, the third thing is it's not a good screenshot here, but at Moodle we use Matrix a lot, and I know you guys are getting into Matrix as well. I saw some other presentations at the conference, so it's awesome. And imagine what I just described, but operating at a organization level. So imagine an AI that knows all about what's going on around the whole organization and sits in the chats and is in fact a kind of project manager, helping each team get things done and keeping everyone on track and monitoring tasks and following up and doing all that boring admin stuff of management. And for me, a manager is not like on top of the team. For me, a manager supports the team, right? So it's like that. It's actually helping the team work together very efficiently. And that's also a learning situation too. So that's actually the thing we're working on first, is this one. And we've already had MoodleBot, which is an instance of this, operating at Moodle for the last 2 years. It's not very smart yet. It doesn't remember very much of what's going on around the company, but it will. That's what we're working on now. We also have a project called MoodleNet, which I'll mention very briefly, which is quite a wonderful system for bookmarking, like social bookmarking, basically. Open education resources. And the idea here is to try and find a place for measuring and storing quality around resources, so that there's a place where you can go and you can immediately see quality resources that are useful to you. That's going to become increasingly important as the internet becomes full of AI-generated rubbish. So that's that. And then the last thing I want to tell you about is Open EdTech. So Fred Dixon and I are the founders of the Open EdTech Association. We have a couple of slides here about it. If you see hashtag Open EdTech anywhere, that's our hashtag. We're claiming it. That's where you should end up on our website when you see those. So what does Open EdTech do? It's recently been a little bit rebooted. We've simplified what it does. In the beginning, we were trying to build products and we just didn't have resources for that or time. So what we're doing now is more helping product organizations work together. So firstly, we define what is open education technology as an ecosystem and a brand. I mean, it's great. Wouldn't it be great if parents at a school said, I want BigBlueButton because it's open EdTech, right? And they trust open EdTech as a brand because it stands for certain values. So one of the things Open EdTech does is certify particular technologies as meeting Open EdTech's trust requirements. Trust is very, very important. So let's dig into that. What are the 5 requirements? Firstly, it needs to be open source. And I don't need to tell you what open source is, but it's transparent, free to modify and share. Secondly, it should be sustainable. Now, this is a lot of open source out there. There's great open source out there that isn't very sustainable. And maybe you've used some, and then the person who made it left, moved on, and they're not around anymore. That's not very good for education. We can't have that happening. So it's important for anyone running an open source project or an open EdTech project that they have a plan for how they're going to sustain the project going forward. And it could be a business model, but it could be a stable source of funding from somewhere, however they work it out. Maybe they crowdfund it like Wikipedia every year, however, but they need to have some plan. And ideally, people who lead these things care about the software first. So they're not just running a business and it happens to be open source. You know, they can't be focused on the money first. They have to be focused on the usefulness of the product. The third thing, open EdTech projects should listen to educators. So you need to work with educators, get the feedback. The developers need to have direct access to the users so they understand what it is that's needed. And that ensures that open EdTech products follow the trends and what educators need. The opposite side to that is it should support developers. So you can't just have 1 or 2 developers in the middle of a project only working alone. Again, you've got risk. if you support and engage developers around your project, then it's going to be stronger, and it's going to, worst case, maybe the central product company disappears for some reason. It doesn't matter. There's plenty of developers who could take it and keep going. And lastly, and importantly, it should use standards. And this is one of the major activities of Open EdTech, is deciding on some standards that we think are important. Now, we're not creating standards, we're curating standards. And the reason is that if you're building a particular education framework for an institution or something, you need to have lots of components and you need to use them together. And it's ideal if they just plug together, like they're designed to work together. And that means sharing data and sharing, authentication and also, and especially now in AI, a lot of interoperability on the AI as well. You don't want to have 5 AIs installed when you could just have one, and so on. So that's what we do. And you can see here in the standards area that we're focusing on standards around data formats. We're focusing on standards around interoperability, so things where you could link. So LTI is a standard we like. Matrix is a good standard. And lastly, tech stacks. So when you're implementing AI locally, it would be quite good to have some understanding of which pieces are good. If you've looked into AI implementation, there is a million projects on GitHub and elsewhere. It's very confusing, and we can do the job of saying, look, here are a few that make it a lot easier, and if we're all using those same things, that we can ourselves move forward faster as well. And not everyone has to do a lot of research. And lastly, we provide networking opportunities, and we, there's got to talk about this stuff a lot, and we've got to discuss, and so that's what we're all doing, is everyone's learning together around Open EdTech. So if you're interested in that, it's free. Come on, openedtech.global. Now we have membership tiers as well, because our own organization has to be sustainable. If you want to be certified, you do have to be a paying member, and that's quite normal with these sorts of things. But then you're part of the conversation, right, with Open EdTech. So yeah, have a look at that. If you're interested in seeing what's happening with the research stuff I mentioned, there's a QR code here, or just go to moodle.me/research and join in on our AI discussions or whatever, anything else. And look, I hope that if we go back to the original title, which I didn't set the original title, by the way, I had a different title, but Open Education Will Save the World. I mean, maybe we can, right? Maybe we can use open education technology and open education in general to help push us more towards this world. Okay, you may not like this city, that's fine, okay, but there is a lot of versions of Utopia that I think we could head for, and I think we should be. And we're at such an interesting time right now. The next 20 years are going to be absolutely the most amazing that anyone's ever seen. All right, well, I think that's me. There's some details. These slides are available at that QR code, and some contact details if you want to reach out. I'm on Matrix and Mastodon and Mail. And thank you very much. And I seem to have come in on time, Fred.
Thank you, Martin. So that was awesome. Feel free to give some claps there, use the emojis. We have a few minutes. It was 45 minutes, but we do have an hour. I would encourage anybody that has questions, please type them in the chat. Feel free to unmute yourself as well. We'll take a few minutes here to answer any questions that we have. Very stimulating though. And I think if I can only say from a personal point of view that every week or month, it becomes more clear the changes that are happening around the world and being pulled forward or pushed from behind with AI. And I think as humans, we have a trouble adapting to the world that already is. Things are changing around us. It's us who are having to adapt and think about it. And really appreciate your perspective, Mark, of someone who's sort of on the foreground trying to think about it, turn around and look at us behind us and say, come over here, think about it this way, and here's a better way to, here's a better way of looking at things. And it's not dystopia. It can be utopia if we go in the right directions, but we have to pick those directions and go there.
Yeah, there's always been a battle between the people who think more openly, communally minded, and then the people who think more like, me. There's always been that war. But the difference now is that as our world gets smaller and smaller, effectively, because we are all connected, that some people with the power of these machines have more power than ever. They're amassing, $1 trillion data centers. Microsoft are putting AI onto everyone's laptops by default, and it's going to look at everything on your screen. And we know from Edward Snowden, Microsoft is very connected to all the US government spies and everything. I mean, is that the world we want to create? A big mass surveillance machine? Do we want everyone's opinions shaped by when they're talking to their Microsoft AI? Do we want your opinions shaped into that particular way of thinking? I don't think so, and I don't think that's healthy. There's in the AI world, the open source movement is stronger than ever. I'm so happy to see it. There are 750,000 models, so 750,000 open source models on Hugging Face, which is amazing. It's great. And I'm so glad to see it. And I think as open projects, both of us, we're part of that new movement going into the future.
Totally. I think motivation comes from you either repelled away from something or pulled towards something. We can be repelled away from a society where we've ceded the playing field to commercial companies that just have their own goals, or we could pull towards an environment where open source and open educational technologies and collaboration around the world takes these tools and actually creates a better environment for us, a better educational environment. That's what pulls us. I'm all in on that one. I think people can change the world. I think you just have to push really hard. And as we joke a little bit at the Big Blue Button Project, when we started it, we were either too smart to know we could succeed, know we had a 100% chance to succeed, or we were too dumb to know all the challenges in front of us. And I think it's a bit of both. So you just have to let's just go for it. Sure, other things along the way, but it is very empowering what's possible to do with AI. And we should try to do the right things with it.
Yeah, I mean, everybody here, in your own situations, you have some influence over your area, and try and introduce openness, fairness into those environments, and try and think a little bit about the infrastructure you're building and make it so that it is something that your organization or your area, whatever it is, owns. They own that, rather than everyone renting from landlords all the time. Yeah, you remember? Yeah, that's the danger, that we all become helpless basically, and we're all using stuff from 2 or 3 companies, which are really much one company, So yeah.
All right, look, Martin, I want to thank you again, folks. Martin's very accessible. There's some various three different ways you can reach him. I think we all, again, thank you, Martin. Thank you for sharing your time, your perspective, and just thank you for all the work you've done over the years. There's so much that is in place today in the educational market because of Moodle, because of your leadership, because of your just determination to do things the way that you think that you should be doing. And you came up with some principles at the beginning. I think the challenge that people have is they get overwhelmed by, oh my God, all these examples of AI, what do they mean? But if you actually have a framework of looking at the world, you can use that framework to cut through a lot of cruft, and then you could use that to focus efforts. And I think you got it right with, a framework, the 5 principles, and it just focuses people in the effort. And I thank you for all the work that you've done on the effort. It's awesome.
We'll keep working on it together, all of us. Thank you so much, and look how wonderfully smooth Big Blue Button is. It's such a pleasure to use that days. Really enjoy it. So Thanks, everybody.
Awesome,
I'm
Martin.
looking forward to a Moodle and BigBlueButton integration growing as well.